Hey, folks, today's episode is brought to you by my favorite sponsor. I love all the sponsors, but this is my favorite. SunsetLakeCBD.com. Use the coupon code LEFTISBEST. You will get 20% off. You will get 20% off their tinctures that come in multiple different flavors and multiple different concentrations. Some with melatonin, which help you sleep at night. Some which just help you relax. You will also get 20% off of their CBD fudge or CBD coffee, which is my weekend brew. Also, lotions. This is my favorite. It's unscented. I never put lotion on my body except for this. Sometimes, I'm not going to lie, my knees and my elbows get a little bit too dry, and my calves do, and they get itchy, and that's what I put on there. But they also have salves with arnica that are good for your muscles, and I use them for my eczema, even though that's off-label usage. They have, like I say, smokables. They have pre-rolls and nice on its own after a meal, or for an entourage effect with other things that you may smoke. Sunset Lake CBD, they have their product has a tremendous amount of integrity. Like, you can look at their third-party assessment analysis of what's in it. They'll tell you exactly all the things that are there. And what you will not find is any pesticides, because they use integrated pest management. They don't use any pesticides. They also use regenerative farming practices that they developed with the University of Vermont. They also have great business practices, mostly employee-owned, $20 minimum wage, and they are real movement partners. They've given thousands of dollars to things like strike funds, refugee resettlement, money to food pantries, and criminal justice reform. Just an all-around great company, all-around great product. You cannot go wrong. They're longtime listeners of the show. Left is best, 20% off, sunsetlakecbd.com. Oh, also the gummies. I had a few of those this weekend.
Whoa.
I went to a wedding, and I had some of the CBD THC gummies.
Went nuts?
I didn't go
like
too crazy, but I didn't want to, there was, you're around family, and sometimes, I don't need to go into that. SunsetLakeCBD.com, 20% off. They're at SunsetLakeCBD.com. Check it out. Now, time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, June 26, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Kimberly St, Julian-Varnon, history Ph.D. candidate, the University of Pennsylvania. On Russia's mutiny near coup, we'll find out. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court allows, but not insists, for Louisiana's congressional map to be redrawn to include another majority black district. Joe Biden reverses Trump's policy that allowed U.S. tax dollars to be used for research in illegal Israeli settlements. Jim Jordan, call your office. The Supreme Court allows a case of a wrestling team's doctor to proceed against Ohio State.
A loss for groomers.
A loss for groomers, and Jim Jordan is going to end up in that discovery, ladies and gentlemen.
Looking forward to that.
Yesterday, yesterday was the 10-year anniversary of the Supreme Court gutting the Voting Rights Act, specifically Section 5. New polling. Trump's Republican primary lead grows after his indictment. Conservatives win in Greek election, re-electing the New Democracy Party. Starbucks workers to stage labor actions at 150 stores nationwide. And Tim Scott's absence from the Senate while he campaigns for vice presidency, allowing for a smooth sailing for some quality Biden judicial nominees. Jesse Waters gets the coveted proto-fascist at 8 p.m. Fox slot. And heat waves in India threaten to make large parts of that country uninhabitable by perhaps as early as mid-century. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us at the beginning of the week. It's going to be a dynamic week, to say the least. And of course, back from her little jaunt to the
compound,
to the hipster compound, the cool kids compound in West Virginia. Emma Vigland, back after making Tim Pool cry.
I mean, he didn't cry. Let's not go all the way there. We wouldn't be so
not on air. He didn't cry.
Libelous to call someone a pedophile, which is apparently what he's engaging
for
in
being
a little bit this
pro-sex
morning about
education.
me.
Yeah.
Which is why he wanted to hang out with me so badly after, and I said I gotta go. He took that a little personally.
Yeah,
he got more red-faced about the accusation that they called the Nazi shooting your psyop than apparently your pedophilia.
Yeah, it's a little odd. But anyway,
and just to be clear, he's not. It's not libelous. It is slander.
Oh, sorry.
Because he's been saying it, and he knows that's not true. And the pedophile does have a specific definition, but I mean, it's not like. Although, I mean, the guy's been bragging about how much of a mansion and a skate park he has. It might be nice to have that, like if you wanted to go visit.
Yeah,
And,
I mean, look,
whatever.
Who cares? Who cares?
But there it is. We will talk about that a bit. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Today is my daughter's graduation from high school. And so I've got to leave a little bit early in the fun half to attend that. And I'm going to be off after Tuesday. I'm going to be off. We're going to be off a little bit for July 4th and this, that, but I'm going to miss Wednesday and Friday. I'm taking my kids on a little bit of a road trip before one of them flies the coop, as it were.
Yeah.
Heading off to college, and it happens really early.
Can you believe it though? How old was Milo when you started the Majority Report?
0. Yeah, she was not born yet when I started doing the Majority Report on Air America. The many longtime listeners will remember when she was born, and now she's about to graduate.
It's amazing.
In a matter of hours. Let's get on to this. Oh, here it is. This is a fascinating development. You've heard of the Moms of Liberty. Is that what they call themselves?
Yeah.
And Moms of Liberty.
Also known as Planned Karenhood.
Yeah.
That's good.
Ben Dixon's.
I was very sad to see RFK actually showing up at one of their events. That was rather disappointing. And they have. There's been reported ties with the Proud Boys that they have had, and et cetera.
Hitler quotes.
Well, that's the point. They got in trouble the other day for putting out a newsletter that was quoting Hitler, and you saw them get out there and apologize.
And tell the people who reported on it to do better.
It's totally a mistake you can just make,
Well, I think it is if your mindset is similar. And it's not impossible for two people to come up with the same idea. Like, I mean, for instance, your buddy Tim Pool was complaining because Muse, I don't know the band, apparently he's convinced stole his idea.
Oh,
for like a song or a music video. I don't know. I don't
sure
follow that stuff.
I'm sure they did.
But maybe if there's two people who are like-minded, they can come up with the same sort of like common denominator idea. That is what could have happened with Mothers of Liberty or Liberty Moms of Liberty or whatever their name is. But here at the, this is Ryan Helfenbein, Senior VP of Communications of Liberty University. And
Helfenbein, huh?
Yeah, the Helfenbein. And he not
Wait,
da.
no, damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Liberty University,
I'm
incidentally,
off.
Liberty University is the university founded by Jerry Falwell, if I'm not mistaken. Was it Falwell?
Pretty sure, yeah.
They were famous for not allowing black and white people to date back in the day. And
literal segregation.
Yeah. And here he is on the Right Side Broadcasting Network with Brian Glenn at the Faith and Freedom Coalition Conference, explaining who they are taking their tactics from in terms of the way they're going to approach American society.
Wholly agree with that. Basically, this is an evangelistic movement on the left, and that's what's happening. It's indoctrination. I mean, they are proselytizing to the next generation, and what we're discovering as parents.
And I'm not even sure about this, but I presume what he's saying that they're proselytizing. And I will assure you, this is not the first communications vice president from Liberty University who has said in the past 40, 50 years, the left is trying to convert all our kids to gays. This is like I have found that if I keep my ties from when I was like in my 20s, like 30 years ago, if I wait long enough, they come back. These guys do the same thing with their attacks on different people. But all right, continue.
Wholly agree with that. Basically, this is an evangelistic movement on the left, and that's what's happening. It's indoctrination. I mean, they are proselytizing to the next generation, and what we're discovering as parents and conservatives is, wait a second, education really is evangelism. So if you don't control education, you cannot control the future. And Stalin knew that, Mao knew that, right? Hitler knew that. We have to get that back for conservative values.
Can you imagine, like, what is going through your mind? Hitler knew that.
Yeah.
First off, education is not evangelism. Evangelism is spreading the news of the gospel, which is a faith, not even there's no thinking associated with it. It is, you believe in God, period, end of story. You do not question it. That is the whole point of it. If that happens to be your thing, go with whatever it is that you pray to. That's fine. But that is not what education is. Education is teaching people how to learn. Education is actually opening up people's minds and telling them how to question. The reason why, if you're from Liberty University and you are a fundamentalist of any stripes, just in this instance happens to be Christian, but any stripes, why you can so easily associate yourself with totalitarian regimes and quote and find tactics used by Hitler to be helpful to you is because you're doing the exact same thing, different flavor of what it is you want them to subscribe to uber alles, as it were, and to the exclusivity of everything else. But that's why you can say, we should take some tips from Hitler because we're doing a similar project. Some of the details may be different, but the way that we want to feed this into people's brains so that they don't have any opportunity to question or doubt or think for themselves, that's full-on fundamentalism. That's the same sort of methodology that whatever it was, Mao, Stalin, Hitler used.
And all of this stuff, projection about grooming and indoctrination, that's what it is. It's just projection, because they're the ones that are trying to so tightly control what is being consumed by children that they have to pretend that that's what the left is doing.
Yeah,
when the left
proselytize.
and normal people want to open up people's minds, or that's what education's supposed to be, where you are opened up to different perspectives. It's clearly the opposite of what they're talking about when they talk about control. Yeah,
the Moms for Liberty, Hamilton County, Indiana, had he alone who owns the youth, and owns was all caps. I don't think Hitler emphasized it this way. Gains in all caps the future, and then in italics Adolf Hitler. And they said, we should have condemned him in that, but like your entire mission is exactly that, what Hitler said.
Exactly. And for a slightly, although let's be clear, gay people were one of like a top one or two on the list for Hitler to go after in the during the
Nazi
Holocaust
Germany.
in Nazi Germany. All right, we're going to take a break in just a moment. Get with Kimberly St. Julian-Varnon, history Ph.D. candidate at the University of Pennsylvania, on the recent developments in Russia. First, a word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Zippix. Zippix nicotine toothpicks. If you are a smoker or a vapor, it is time for you not to fill your lungs with smoke or God knows what's in that vape either. And you can get your nicotine fix, though, in a much healthier way. Nicotine is an addictive substance. Believe me, take it from me as someone who it took years and years and years to quit smoking. You don't want to get involved with this stuff if you don't have to. But if you're smoking and vaping and you want to try and quit, Zippix toothpicks give you an easier and healthier and more discreet way to get your nicotine fix. They're available in 6 flavors. They come in both 2 milligrams and 3 milligrams nicotine options, so you can step down as you go. Zippix are perfect for flights or sporting events or restaurants or literally anywhere where smoking and vaping are banned. They're also one of the most cost-effective nicotine products on the market. And then what you can do if you get yourself off the nicotine, or you can slowly ease it off, is to do what I do and chew on toothpicks that have B12 and caffeine. Where are my toothpicks? I don't have them there. Now I'm in a mild state of panic. But they have 2 different flavors of the B12 and caffeine toothpicks and help you kick the nicotine habit. Zippix have already helped tens of thousands of customers leading a healthier lifestyle. If you currently smoke or vape, maybe they can help you too. Make your lungs happy. Try Zippix nicotine toothpicks so that you can ditch the cigarettes and ditch the vape. Get some nicotine-infused toothpicks at zippixtoothpicks.com today. Get 10% off your first order by using the code MAJORITY at checkout. Your lungs are going to be glad you did. Just a disclaimer, this product contains nicotine, which is an addictive chemical. You must be 21 or older to order. Zip more, smoke less with Zippix nicotine toothpicks. All right, we're going to take a quick break and head into the welcome Kimberly St. Julian-Varnon back to the show. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us again on the show, Kimberly St. Julian-Varnon, history Ph.D. candidate at the University of Pennsylvania. Kimberly, welcome back to the show. I think the last time we spoke, was probably a year ago, maybe in like February, as the Russian invasion had begun. And before we get to what happened this weekend and sort of what has been leading up to that, give me your sense of like, did you think that this conflict would last this long? Like if we had asked you to predict, because I think early on, the Biden administration did two things. One in the run up to the invasion was to try and like make everybody aware that that's what our intelligence said that they were going to do, which nobody seemed to believe, including the Ukrainians. And then two, I think that the Biden administration thought that if this invasion took place, it would be over in a week. Russia would occupy large swaths of Ukraine, if not with its own military, but certainly in terms of its control by putting in essentially a client state there. Have you been surprised by what has taken place over the past year and a half or so, or 2 years almost?
No, I haven't been surprised. At the initial stages of the war, I remember hearing people thinking, oh, it's going to be done in a month, 2 months. They're going to set up a client state in the Donbass and that'll be it. And I was like, either you don't know Ukrainians or you don't know Russians if you think it's going to be a short-term war. I still think it's going to be a long, drawn-out war. It's going to be a war of attrition, even with the destabilizing or allegedly destabilizing events over the past weekend. We haven't seen really any Russian let-up. So if the sides are Ukraine will not give up a single inch of Ukrainian territory and Russia wants to keep the Donbass, you're going to have a conflict until either one of those positions changes. So no, I don't think we're going to see a quick end. So yeah, this isn't unexpected to me.
And just to remind people, you spent a significant amount of time in Ukraine and prior to the war, right? In the years leading up there, and doing your research and academic work. Is it your sense that the United States is inhibiting obviously, United States is providing a lot of military equipment and money to sustain the Ukrainian war effort. And so, someone could say like, well, the U.S. is enabling Ukrainians in that way. But is it your sense that the U.S. is in any way inhibiting any inclination by Ukrainians, if it exists, to come to a negotiated settlement with Russia?
I don't think so. And I think, we know that the Ukrainians are getting tons of financial and military aid from the United States. But even if the United States wasn't giving this aid, Ukraine would still fight. I mean, we saw the farmers with the tractors, trying to take Russian tanks early on. And I think that's something important to understand. And even if the United States declines and decreases its military aid, which we know the GOP is interested in, that doesn't mean that its Western allies are going to also follow. It's particularly the Baltics and Poland. I very much doubt that either one of those sides are going to stop helping Ukraine. So I think it's also important to remember that the United States isn't the central actor here. It's not the key power player in terms of how things are going to turn out. But I think it'd probably be in the United States' interest. They would probably want to see a negotiated settlement because it means the Republican talking points are gone about the United States continuing to support Ukraine. So I don't think the United States is the determinative factor of how long the Ukrainians are going to fight. The Ukrainians are going to fight to the last Ukrainian because they saw it happen in 2014. I mean, you have to keep fighting or the Russian occupation is going to continue.
Well, this was in the midst of a Ukrainian counteroffensive, right, where they were beginning to take back territory. What's the significance of that in regards to this Wagner attempted mutiny or whatever the heck we saw over the weekend?
I love that. Is whatever the heck. We know it's not a coup. It's a mutiny, insurrection, march for justice, whatever Prigozhin's calling it. I actually, in terms of my lens of understanding why it happened at the time it did, to me, it's less because of the Ukrainian offensive and more because of the deadline that the Ministry of Defense put on Wagner to sign contracts with the Ministry of Defense. So I think if we look at what's happened in the past 48 hours, it doesn't seem like Ukraine has made that much. I don't think that the Prigozhin insurrection helped Ukraine that much when you think about it. We still see shelling of Kherson and Kiev. They made about 1,000 meters of progress towards Bakhmut, but that's not that significant. So I think it's less the timing of the Ukrainian offensive and more the timing of the deadline that the Ministry of Defense gave Prigozhin.
All right, well, let's go back and get everybody on the same page, because I imagine a lot of people have heard about the Wagner Group for the first time. Is it Wagner or Wagner?
If you want to put on a German accent, it's Wagner. Allegedly, Prigozhin named it after Richard Wagner, the German composer, or Wagner. As long as you know who we're talking about, either one I think is good.
I always like to do a German accent whenever I can. So, go back, because the real, I mean, the Wagner Group has been there, but really they seem to sort of like get highlighted in the fight in Bakhmut. At least I think for like sort of popular, but give us a sense of what this is and where it fits in the context, because we have a Wagner Group, and I don't know what the most recent name of it is, but it was Blackwater back during Iraq, and then it became J, and now I don't know what the Prince is calling it. But I imagine we have other groups that aren't quite as sort of flashy, but essentially mercenary armies. But the Wagner Group, where they get their mercenaries from, is sort of special, it seems like.
It is very special. So the Wagner Group, we've really been hearing about them since the 2014 initial Russian incursions into the Donbass. And so when you think about the little green men we heard about in Crimea and in Luhansk and Donetsk, they were kind of part of that. And really what we saw were these early reports of Wagner in 2014, but Prigozhin wasn't necessarily connected to them. And now, by 2022, Wagner and Prigozhin are kind of household names. So they're not just operating in Ukraine, they're operating in Libya, Syria, but also throughout the African continent. And so if you think about it, the Wagner Group, because they're a private mercenary group, they can do things that aren't necessarily directly tied back to the Russian state. We've seen this a lot on the African continent. Wagner has been accused of atrocious crimes, including mass sexual assaults against women in the Central African Republic. And when people complain, like the UN or the internet, the Human Rights Commission, when they complain to Russia, Russia's like, well, they don't work for us. They're not, a state military capacity. Although we know in Russia, if you have a private mercenary group without Putin's consent, you don't tend to live very long. So the Wagner Group, what they've been able to do is kind of be the most powerful mercenaries, and they're incredibly well trained. They're better trained than the Russian military. But what happened was the war of Ukraine, they've suffered a lot of casualties. And so Prigozhin has a very interesting idea. What if you take people from prisons and train them to be armed killers and then let them loose in Ukraine and the Central African Republic, among others? And that's what's happened. I think I've seen numbers of up to 20,000 of Wagner's troops are people from Russian prison colonies and prison camps who have been recruited. And what happens is, I think this happened last week, actually, where Putin signed a decree saying if you fought for Wagner and you were in prison, once you finish fighting, you're free. You are out of prison. And this is not just people who've committed petty crimes. These are people who have committed murders, who've committed violent felonies, who have been released and fought for Wagner. So
we should say this is all based upon if I remember correctly, the movie The Dirty Dozen with Lee Marvin, where he had a squad of people left from prison.
Well, also isn't Prigozhin a former prisoner as well?
I mean, he has one of the best, criminal CVs you could find in Russia. And people make fun of him because he used to operate a hot dog stand. Hot dog stands, food stands like that in the late 90s, it's money laundering. It's a front for money laundering. So, he's a well-versed criminal, and he really tapped into something where you have this large prison population. The Russian state doesn't want to feed them, doesn't want to pay for them. So you recruit them, you arm them, and they go fight, because what else do they have to lose? And then when you finish fighting, you're free. So what we've seen in Ukraine in particular are the use of these troops. But what's interesting to me has been the two high-profile cases of two African nationals who were imprisoned in Russia who have been killed in action while fighting for Wagner. One was from the Zambia, and I think one was from Ghana. And so now you have the situation of not only is Prigozhin running his own private mercenary group, and he's been running it for a very long time. Around early winter, we saw him publicly dogging out Shoigu and Gerasimov, like the general staff of the Russian military. He's constantly talking about them and dogging them out. And that was really surprising. But the killing of these two African nationals also puts heat on Russia, because these African states want to know, how do these African nationals even end up in Ukraine? So you have a lot of different pressure points kind of operating with Wagner's, very strange way of recruiting people.
And we should just say, Sergei Shoigu, I think is how you pronounce it, or I don't know, you tell me, is the defense minister, and Valery Gerasimov is the commander of Russia's army in Ukraine. And so I guess basically like Colin Powell and Stormin Norman Schwarzkopf, I guess maybe are the equivalent. And so Wagner's having issues with them. And what is the nature of the criticism been? Is he not getting enough support? Was Bakhmut? Because my always understanding of Bakhmut too was that nobody seemed to think that there was, and maybe this is an incorrect reading on my part, but nobody seemed to think that there was as big of a strategic or tactical advantage in controlling that city as it was sort of like almost a mental one, or emotional one or something. Can you outline that? Like where did this criticism begin, or what started it?
So Prigozhin's big complaints against Shoigu and Gerasimov have been the lack of support for Wagner troops, but also seeing the disarray and the poor training of Russian troops on the ground in places like Bakhmut and throughout the Donbass. And it's also, and you see him, so during his March for Justice, when they captured Rostov-on-Don and the Southern Military District Command, you see him berating, in this video he released, he's berating the military commander of the Southern District Command, Yevkurov. And in the video, he's yelling at him and he's talking about respect. He's saying like the constant disrespect that Wagner gets and how people don't recognize how important Wagner's been to Russian success in the Donbass. So I think that's the important key for understanding Prigozhin. It's like, it's not just we're not getting support and you're sending out these poorly trained guys, but it's also you're not putting respect on what we've done and how many people we've lost to continue to hold Bakhmut. And I think that's the thing, is Bakhmut isn't necessarily strategically important, but it does hold a lot of moral importance and ethical importance to Ukrainians and also to Russians. I mean, when you think about like, why are we fighting over this region that isn't necessarily, or this particular administrative center that doesn't have that much strategic influence, I think it's because of what it's become and what it's meant to Ukrainians and to Russians. But I mean, Bakhmut's also been important for Wagner. That's where a lot of Wagner forces have been based. So that's kind of why it's important, but really his complaints, and he hasn't made a complaint against Putin. I think that's something important that people remember. It's been against the general staff of the Ministry of Defense not recognizing how important Wagner is. But also his key argument is we don't want to be under the Ministry of Defense because look at how bad you've screwed up Ukraine already. Why would we want to be put under the Ministry of Defense's control?
So the Wagner, and we're talking about 25,000 troops. They were fighting they were the tip of the spear in Bakhmut. They take Bakhmut along with other Russian forces, I guess. Russian forces then sort of hold the city. Wagner goes back to the rear, essentially, probably to rest, right? And then these contracts come up. So what was Prigozhin, like, what was his idea? It sounds like almost like he was like running almost like a political campaign to woo the Russian public so that he had some type of leverage in this negotiation. I mean, it's almost like an athlete not showing up to spring training camp or something.
That's actually a good way to put it. And I love that you put it that way, because we've seen, I mean, on social media, like I was getting on a plane to fly back to Houston when everything started happening. And I didn't have internet access for an hour. I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? And then you've seen predictions where Prigozhin's going to knock down Putin and become the new czar of Russia, or Prigozhin's going to take over Moscow. And really what you see is a man who's like, pay attention to me. Look at how hard Wagner has fought. Look at how much people support us in Russia. So don't make us sign these contracts. Don't disband Wagner. Support us. And I think that's an important thing to remember, is why he's doing this and why he stopped before he got to Moscow. Prigozhin did not have the support on the ground, both militarily and publicly, to take over Moscow. That's not necessarily what his interests were. His interests were to show, look at the Southern Military District Command. This is why you're performing so poorly in Ukraine. Look at how easily we took it over and no one put up a fight. All right. So I think that's what he's trying to signal, is his unhappiness, the strength of Wagner forces, the weakness of Russian forces in the South, and also to show Putin, you need us. So don't let us, be under a Ministry of Defense that clearly is not doing things correctly.
This feels like, he's sort of walking quite a tightrope, it seems to me, right? Like, because first off, like, he's assuming that it's going to be super easy for him to do it. And he must have been very aware of like how many military personnel are there. I mean, that city is the sort of the departure point to Ukraine. And so he would have been through there and he would have full understanding of what's going on there, right? They wouldn't need like special intel about this. But he's got to calibrate it so that he comes off as somewhat sympathetic, it seems to me, to the Russian people or whoever. Like, who are the constituencies? Or is it just like he's trying to appeal to Putin and, slag his sort of like institutional, rivals, I guess. And he's hoping that Putin does what in the future? Like, and I'm talking, a couple of days ago when he's sitting there hatching this, what is he hoping? What does he think the outcome is going to be? That he's going to be appointed like general of the forces in Ukraine or something like that?
So yeah, that is the key question, is what was Prigozhin thinking? Because in my understanding, if you've worked on Russia as long as I have, Putin has two options to deal with this, right? And one of those includes a teapot or a window, or you live in exile. And so Prigozhin, I think his key constituency was Putin, to show him the weakness of the Ministry of Defense. And he's been complaining for months. A colleague and I were actually working on an op-ed in March about Prigozhin and how wildly he was talking about the Ministry of Defense and the general staff. But then he was quiet and we're like, oh, well, he's not talking about this anymore. But throughout, you see his complaints about not having enough supplies, not having enough guns. And we're like, is he signaling something? We're thinking about this in March. What is he signaling? And then everything happens. But I think it's also the importance to see to him is how well received Wagner forces were in Rostov in particular. You see the videos on Russian social media, on Telegram, where people are upset that they're leaving and going back to Ukraine, and they're cursing and yelling at the police in Rostov and saying, you're traitors. Like, why'd you make Wagner go away? So I think the idea was show the state, show Putin how important we are, but also show Russian people, we're fighting for you. We're upset at how poorly we're doing in Ukraine as well. Now, after the fit is over and Prigozhin's supposed to be exiled in Belarus, he released a video, like a voice message on Telegram this morning, essentially repeating what he had said, that this is about, Ukraine. We were not traitors to Russia. We never wanted to hurt the Russian war effort. And so if you're Prigozhin, it's like, okay, if you're going to be in exile in Belarus, they're alleging that they're building massive Wagner camps already in Belarus. But the question becomes, what have you done? Because what you have shown Putin is that you are not trustworthy. Not only are you not trustworthy, you're a liability. And when you're a liability to Putin, you tend to be poisoned or fall out of a window or disappear.
Well, that's the thing I'm curious about, because isn't Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, Putin's biggest ally, right? Like, so why would Prigozhin be safe in Belarus, and why would that be the place that he flees? That seems to be a very precarious position for him to be in.
So I think this is where I get to tap into my conspiracy theory brain a little bit. So if you are Prigozhin, you have a family, you have children, and a lot of the higher ranking Wagner members also have families and children. So if he is in Belarus, Lukashenko can keep an eye on him. But if you think about where else can he go? You can't go to Africa because a lot of people hate you there. You can't go to the Middle East because you'll easily be found. You certainly can't go to the West because of the sanctions. So he has very limited options to where he can hide. So if you go to Belarus, you get to stay safe, allegedly, but you also can kind of monitor Wagner forces, but also monitor the safety of your family and your relatives. So I think that was the only option he had.
You mean you're close enough, they're in close proximity enough to Russia? Because there was a story in the Telegraph today, and I don't know how much I trust the Telegraph, that said he got a call on his way to Moscow saying, incidentally, we know where your family lives. But you would think a guy who was head of a mercenary group about to stage a mutiny that I don't want to be misunderstood, or whatever it is that he thought he was doing, would have probably said I think the fact that I have family just living wherever they're living to be a little bit of a liability. Maybe I should send, the guy has to have command. He's wealthy, right? He's got to have command of a small, I would imagine, private jet that could fly into wherever his, outskirts of wherever his family live, and get them all on a plane and send them, I don't know, would it be impossible for his family to land anywhere and get out of the country? Or would that have hurt his attempt to be just I'm just doing this for you, Putin? It seems like a pretty bold and big move to just sort of, get somebody's attention.
It is. It's hard to figure out, but I've never ran my own mercenary group, so maybe I don't understand mercenary thinking. But the saying, there are worse things than death. There are worse things than death, and the FSB can probably do all of them. And so I think, the Telegraph, take it or leave it. But I was thinking, why would he stop? But also, who can they get to? And I think the family is a good way to get to him because of the sanctions. His, a lot of his assets are frozen. His private jets have been down for a while. He hasn't had access to his yacht. There's so few places your family can go, where at least if you're in Belarus, you're close to Russia. You can make sure your family, extended family, can also be safe. But also Putin can keep an eye on you, and you can show him that you're loyal. That's what Prigozhin's going to have to do if he wants to stay alive. He has to show his loyalty, and he needs to come up with something big for Putin. But he'll never be trusted again. And I think that's something he had to have understood that he will never be trusted again.
It sounds like he thought that he wasn't being trusted anyway. So he must have there must have been some indication he was on the wrong list.
It's the contracts, I think. I think it's the contracts and wanting to put Wagner under the MOD. I think that was the signal to him that he needed to do something, or he was going to lose single-handed control of Wagner. I think that's the key to why we see him behaving this way. But also, I think it's one of the reasons why he's not out of a window yet, honestly.
It's because if he goes away and there's no other, that's almost like his insurance card too. I'm the only one who can control this band of 25,000 mercenaries. And it's one thing if they're put under the auspices of the regular army, I guess, and then there's a command structure there. But as long as that doesn't happen, I'm the only one. And I guess I would also be looking around at the table for my lieutenants to seeing who's texting who when we have our meetings or something.
That also seems quite tenuous.
I would be a little bit nervous about, the guys I've been hanging out with and how much authority they have. Well, so and the other question I had was, why is the Wagner Group why were they so popular in Rostov? Why were they so popular in Rostov?
I think that's the never-ending question. It's why is this group so popular? But also, it's not just Rostov. In social media, people were, oh yeah, Prigozhin's going to go fight Putin. I'm like, Prigozhin is a monster. Oh yeah,
he seems worse than that. That would be. As far as a billionaire in charge of mercenary, the idea of Eric Prince, getting that's not necessarily an upgrade from Trump in that, Prince was, very involved in that administration. Like, I wouldn't want a mercenary to have control over the nukes. And, you know, particularly anybody who comes to power in that way. But I want to talk about the implications of it. But yeah, no, I think people could cheer some measure of chaos, I guess. But, you know, good things don't always come out of chaos.
Oh, I mean, particularly studying Russian history, good things rarely come out of chaos. And we saw, when you see the videos in Rostov, I think it's also the way that they come in. I mean, they aren't really bullying civilians around. And a lot of Russians are just like looking around like, oh, this is what's happening now. Okay. But those who support Wagner, I think it's because they see Wagner as the only part of the Russian military effort in Ukraine that's been really successful. So I think they've identified that Russian military success with Wagner, and Prigozhin's been very good at his messaging about the importance of Wagner to any type of Russian military success. But also the people in Rostov, they're getting the news from, you know, Ukraine, and they're getting the news from the Russian state. They're seeing how poorly Russia has been performing. So I think that's the key thing, is being able to take a place that's very close to what's going on, people who know how poorly things are going, but also treating the civilians. He's not being really violent towards them. You see like Wagner guys getting coffee, going to the liquor store. It's really bizarre when you think about it. So I think those are some of the keys. But also I think a lot of the Russian people, particularly those on the border with Ukraine, they're tired. I mean, it's combat fatigue, not knowing how safe you are, not knowing if missiles are going to fly, if there's going to be an errant missile that hits the town. So I think all those kind of come together into the personality that is Prigozhin. I mean, the man's, he's very, you watch his videos and you're like, is this what, like John Belushi could have played him in a documentary if he had just shaved his head, right? So he's very popular. He's very energetic compared to how Putin comes off.
I would imagine mercenaries coming to town too, if they've been told, you know, behave well, they probably have more cash to spend than your regular army. And
Yes.
then all of a sudden it's like, it's almost like, oh, this guy's bringing in the tourism.
It's like when the mob comes to town and buys a bunch of, hands out money or shoes or whatever.
I mean, I would imagine they come in and they pay for everything. And particularly when they know that's the situation. All right. So what does this, like, a lot of people are making like there was no resistance coming from there. And it's hard to tell whether that was on purpose. Like the Russian military said, like, don't engage in this because the only way to control it is to not engage in it in some type of way. But what are the implications? What does it tell us about what's going on right now in Russia? But what does it say in terms of like, does this create a narrative that Putin is weak? Does this create a narrative that the war is going worse than we in Russia thought it was? Like, I don't have a sense of like what the existing narrative was as to whether it was changing. I mean, do you have a sense of those things as to like what it, assuming, you know, that Prigozhin stays in Belarus and his family doesn't get killed, he doesn't get killed, he just stays there, and I don't know, he keeps paying his mercenaries to just sort of hang out. Like, I'm not quite clear on what happens to them, but what does it mean for internal Russian politics?
So it's a good question. And the weird thing was how quiet Putin was for a long time. And a lot of people read into that. And I'm like, also remember Stalin disappeared when the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union. And look at how he came out at the end of World War II, right? The most beloved leader. So I think a lot of people are playing mum. They're following the state narrative. Margarita Simonyan, like the big, propaganda expert and propaganda supporter of the Russian state media. She's been like, things are legal, and then sometimes the laws change depending on the situation. So people are playing pretty mum. But I don't think it's showing this internal crisis that people are predicting. I mean, there is a reason why Prigozhin stopped hundreds of kilometers outside of Moscow. Despite the popularity of Wagner in Rostov-on-Don, we did see fighting in Voronezh. They did have military preparedness in Moscow. You saw multiple cities across Russia prepare with Operation Fortress for any type of attack. And I think the key is, so Prigozhin goes to Belarus. If he continues to lead Wagner and Wagner shows a good, strength in Ukraine, he can survive this. I don't think it's going to be time for Swan Lake to start playing on Russian state television. And I think that when you see a lot of these narratives in the West, that this is the end of Putin, we're going to a civil war, I don't think it's based in what we're seeing on the ground. I think it's based on our imaginations of what people want to happen. But in terms of Russian politics, Moscow was chill yesterday. People are out shopping, doing the thing. And we don't know how much of this information has been spread across Russia. From Telegram channels and state media, they're playing it very cool. So most Russians aren't thinking this is a dire situation. It's like, oh, Prigozhin showed out and now he's in Belarus. We're still fighting. That doesn't necessarily mean, we're in a situation where Putin's trying to leave Russia and never come back again. So they have to be very careful about predicting civil war and things like that, when he really could just keep Prigozhin in Belarus and keep fighting the war in Ukraine.
And to be clear, those Wagner fighters are going to end up back in Ukraine, fighting where, Putin or, et al. Basically say, we need your guys down here. And I would imagine if I'm Prigozhin, I'm nervous. Maybe not right now. Well, I'm nervous, but I'm really nervous about sending big parts of my mercenary army to be led by somebody else in Ukraine, because that's the guy who's going to replace me. That's the guy who makes me dispensable. And I'd be very nervous about that.
Precisely. If I'm Prigozhin, I'm popping Tums every 10 hours, every 10 minutes, because I have heartburn. But I think this is the cost. He's not going to be dead. I think you're going to be strung along. You don't know when you're going to be replaced. You don't know when you're going to be poisoned or if you're going to be poisoned. But I think if we look outside of the Wagner troops going back to Ukraine, how are the Wagner troops posted in Africa behaving? How are they responding to this news? And that's what I've been trying to figure out, is how are they working? Because they control massive land, like diamond mines throughout Central African Republic. They're also protecting a lot of Russian infrastructure throughout sub-Saharan Africa and Northern Africa. So the question becomes, will there be a person who shows up for Wagner that can replace Prigozhin? Or do you just count on his lieutenants carrying out what needs to be done in order to keep him safe in Belarus? So it depends on his relationships with these lieutenants that he has, but also those lieutenants have families too.
Yeah.
What is
I would, if I was him, I would appoint the worst lieutenant I got to lead my mercenaries in battle in Ukraine, and just be like, something about me.
But he's bloodthirsty, right? I mean, he's ideologically we need to be going even harder in Ukraine, being even more brutal, and that I think is why One, it was so short-sighted to see certain people cheering this on. I mean, but at the same time, what is the state of the anti-war left in Russia right now? Because that may be why the fracture was overstated, because this clearly wasn't somebody who was trying to topple Putin in opposition to the war in Ukraine.
Absolutely. That is such a good point. And this is what I was trying to talk about on Twitter when people were saying, oh, this is going to be good for the war in Ukraine. I was like, if you listen to what Prigozhin is saying, he's mad that they haven't been more brutal, that they haven't killed more Ukrainians, that they haven't taken more Ukrainian land. That's what he's angry about, is how little Russia's been able to accomplish in the past year in Ukraine. So if he had been successful, if Prigozhin was able to get Shoigu kicked out, to get Gerasimov, fired, who would have replaced them? And what would have been those aims? So I think that's something important to remember, is, if anything, if he wants to show his loyalty to Putin, and he wants to show why you can't dissolve Wagner, why they need to operate separately for the Ministry of Defense, the only way you show that is with being successful in Ukraine. And being successful in Ukraine, if you're Wagner, is taking as much territory as you can and being as brutal as you can.
What happens to Shoigu and Gerasimov? I feel like, I mean, at one point, and again, it would be hard for me to be watching anything play out and know less as what was going on. But it occurred to me, in terms of how everybody expected Putin to react and not, that it was almost felt like, and I doubt this is the case in retrospect, but it almost felt like Putin It's almost like when Trump would have somebody else go and fire somebody for him. Like that Putin was using Prigozhin as a way of firing somebody or getting it, so that he didn't have to. Because I imagine that if you're Shoigu and Gerasimov, you've got your own constituencies and your own bases of power within the Russian military bureaucracy. And for you to be summarily, fired could create some backlash within those constituencies. But if there is an obvious, they lost face. I mean, this, a fighting force of 25,000 or less just sort of marched through and made mincemeat of them, then it's easier to get rid of those guys if you feel like they've been failing.
Precisely. And I think the key part is thinking about the different constituencies. And when you study Stalinism and how Stalin maintained power, it was people having those different constituencies that would keep you in check and be able to save you. After Stalin dies, you see, the Politburo get rid of Beria because he doesn't have as many constituencies that they have to deal with as other people. And so Shoigu, Gerasimov, when we think about why they stayed in the positions they have, despite Russian military setbacks, it's also their positioning within the Kremlin, their supporters in the Kremlin, but also Putin must believe in them. That has to be one of the reasons why he sticks around. He keeps them around, but also this idea that Putin and Prigozhin have been best buddies, that's not the case. I don't think Putin's ever truly trusted Prigozhin. And so keeping Gerasimov and Shoigu around, they keeps their constituencies happy, but also you need to have those state-based power centers to deal with something like Wagner. I don't know how long Wagner can continue to exist. And I was surprised that it got this big and this powerful under Putin. Because one of the reasons why he's kept the Russian military weak for so long is because it could be an alternative center of power. And so now you have this mercenary group that is an alternative center of power.
Well, Kimberly St. Julian-Varnon, thank you so much for your time today. Hopefully we will see you sooner than the last time. And as things continue, I mean, sadly, it feels like this is going to go on for quite some time. But really appreciate your coming on and sort of explaining to the extent that we can know what is going on there, what has been going on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break and head into the fun half of the program. We're going to get to some clips. I know a lot of people are interested in hearing your thoughts, Emma, of your trip down to the Cool Kids skate
compound, baby.
And certainly Tim and that other guy, Sean, have been really just...
I'll just say I was surprised given how the interview went that they expected me to hang out after.
I mean, Tim seemed really mad at you and was basically saying you're someone told you what to say.
Right.
As if you haven't been following any of this stuff.
This is why you guys don't get invited places.
He's basically saying you're an asshole, and this is why you don't get invited places. And then he's like, "We invited you to say." But honestly, I got to be honest.
Take a picture of me while I go up this half pipe. I got a lot on my mind right now. I think this is the best way to express it.
Yeah.
I got to be honest. There is no scenario that I can think of that doesn't involve me having some type of massive gut bacteria problem that would have me stay there 1 minute longer than I needed to.
Literally, yeah. I mean, I went to the airport a few hours early. One, I wanted to call you guys and say hi. And two, I went in there with the purpose of trying to make my point come across because I disagree with his politics so vehemently that it's not someone I would socialize with. Also, yeah, I'm not impressed by the compound. I think that was a little upsetting.
I got to be honest. We'll go into the fun half to talk more about this. But he posted a picture of him doing, a trick that, it's impressive. I certainly couldn't do it. My son can. who's 10, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I like skateboarding. I like to watch it. I think it's pretty cool. I'm surprised that his whole skateboard park is just made out of plywood.
Well, I saw that ramp. I saw the ramp that he posted.
Cement. Like I thought it was
there's
real
some cement half pipes there.
That's what I was thinking of. I didn't see the park. I saw some of the ramp.
He just did.
Oh, you're lying, Emma. You
actually
saw the whole thing, and you actually said how cool it was when you were there. But now you have to lie about it. And actually, that's a big red flag. It's a bigger red flag than me supporting child labor.
Yeah.
Well, the long and short of it is, the reason why you focus on she was really dubious about the whole thing about seeing the skate park is because you don't want to talk about the 2 hours of issues that you discussed because it didn't go the way that you thought it would.
Right.
But we, in addition to talking about his pictures of him doing skateboard tricks, are going to be talking about that a little bit today and then even more so tomorrow.
Because Sam's got to go a little early, so we'll do the deep dive tomorrow, but we'll touch on it today, guys.
I scheduled my daughter's graduation ceremonies so that we could avoid and really spend a little more time talking about, we
wanted to draw
we're going to need to do a little more skate park investigations before we get into this. I should also say that other dude, Sean, and maybe we'll talk about this. I did not know this because I did not get to see the entire interview with you because we had to do the show.
Right.
But at the end, he said that he wanted to hang out with me and go to dinner and come on the show and debate. And
the dinner thing? That's weird.
I'm afraid that's probably not going to happen.
I don't want to go to dinner.
The debate thing, and so I didn't get to anything. As you know, I was at a wedding this weekend. I was up in the woods. I didn't have real access to stuff. It was like a 3-hour drive down, and I had graduation dinner. So last night, I get I see that he's been saying he's not responding to me.
Yeah.
It's
been like 48 hours. Yeah.
So I DM'd him, and I think we're going to set up something for the first week of August to debate what he wants to debate or something, and we'll see. But
it's funny that Emma beat both of them, and by the time, basically Tim had basically acting like that guy wasn't even there.
Yeah.
And I was surprised too that I saw I went.
Well, let's save this for the fun half.
All right.
Folks, just a reminder: it is your support that can make this show possible. You can help the show survive and thrive. And if you heard any of the debate, you know how poorly we're doing. Tim, it's because, in part of it is because we're jerks, and we don't get
invited places.
And we don't get invited places except for sushi and skating after the interview.
Sushi, that is just so hilarious.
I mean, look, I had some good sushi.
You know what it's called? It's called lunch.
Yeah.
It's called lunch. You don't have to tell everybody what you're serving.
Yeah.
But okay. What was and what we didn't know what the beverage is going to be.
True.
Folks, you can help this show survive and thrive by becoming a member today. As you know, part of what we do is we have experts on in the first hour of the show. Like, for instance, Kimberly St. Julian-Varnon. And the second half of the show, we make fun of people like Tim Pool. In part, we're mostly about their ideology, but in part also to make them feel like they need to argue to the 15, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, younger people, that they're actually cool. So that they their political worldview is adopted. They're all about culture being upstream from politics, et cetera, et cetera. So that's part of what we do here. And if you become a member, you not only get the free show free of commercials, you also get the fun half of the program, and you can IM us during the fun half via our app at majorityapp.com. And you can hear us spend more time making fun of people that you think really deserve to be made fun of. Also, don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Emma, ESVN.
Yeah, so we'll talk about some of the NBA trades that happened around the draft. I'm kind of mad about Porzingis to Boston, unfortunately. I think that's actually a really good fit for them.
I've heard good thing. I miss Smart. I'm gonna miss Smart.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah, well,
I think he was the most fun player to watch on the team. In my
heart and
estimation.
soul.
Yeah, that sucks for them. But I mean,
rid of
I
Brown.
thought they were being a little reactionary about trying to trade. Well, we'll talk about all this, and also the NHL completely just like caving to anti-gay hate mongers and getting rid of their pride jerseys, as well as I just want to do like a little bit too early of a deep dive into the over/unders for the NFL season because I'm getting the fantasy football itch. YouTube.com/ESPN show.
I want that on my board too. You can't be the only one who gets to deploy that. I want that. Like, I may commission a soundboard on our app just so I can carry that around with me.
Look, I thought the debate went well in a variety of ways, but even if the other things that I thought went well didn't happen, just that moment where he lost it and said whoopsie would have been worth it for me.
It sounds like that high on the hill with a lonely goat herd drop that you have.
Oh yeah.
They whoopsie.
On the hill, the goat herd lay,
Whoopsie.
Besides 90 minutes of replaying Whoopsie on Left Reckoning, what do you got planned?
Yeah, for patrons, patreon.com/Left Reckoning, we had a great conversation with Brian Box Brown updating the legalization push for marijuana. Also, He-Man comics and their place in propaganda, American corporate propaganda. So check that out, patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
Quick break, fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
All right, folks, we're back. I'm only here for another couple of minutes, and I, of course, lost my sound sheet. Good job, Sam. All right, why don't you set these up anyways? Because you know, the funny thing is that your debate with Tim is probably going to have derailed both shows.
Yeah.
It's going to derail his show because he's going to be dealing with this mentally for a long time, and ours because we're not going to do anything other than play that sound drop.
Because you're not having real conversations.
This is why we never get invited anywhere.
I know. I mean, like, all right, so let's play that clip before, you have to go, just to give people a teaser before we get into it, because...
All right, set it up.
This is obviously the thing that went viral, where I was probably around an hour and 15 into the 2-hour debate, and
and we should say this. Hold on.
Yeah.
You thought thought the thing was going to be pre-taped. Originally, we thought it was live, right?
But then he told me it was going to be. They told us he was going to be pre-taped, and then when I got there, he said, "Oh, we're going to do it live," and I was like, "Okay." I was